The sun hung low over the horizon, painting the Texas sky with hues of gold and crimson. Dust swirled lazily across the plains, carried by a tired breeze that whispered of another long day. Clara tightened the threadbare shawl around her shoulders, her hands trembling from both exhaustion and the weight of her decision. She had walked for 2 days, each step driven by the desperate knowledge that she had nowhere left to go. Her shoes were worn thin, her dress frayed and patched more times than she cared to count. But her spirit, though bruised and bent by life's cruelties, still carried a fragile ember of hope. That was what had brought her here, to the edge of a sprawling ranch owned by a man whose reputation was whispered across towns, Samuel Hayes, a widowed rancher with a scarred past and a hardened silence. Clara stood at the wooden gate, fingers gripping the rough rail. She knew she had nothing to offer except the strength of her back and the willingness to work until her body gave out. No dowry, no family name, no inheritance. Just calloused hands and a promise. When she knocked on the ranch house door, her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break free from her chest. The door creaked open, and there he stood, tall, broad-shouldered, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms thick with labor. His dark hair was streaked with sun and time, and his eyes, a stormy gray, held the kind of pain that only men who had buried love knew. He didn't speak at first, only studied her with a gaze that seemed to strip away the layers of her story without her saying a word. "I'll work, till my hands bleed," Clara blurted, her voice cracking. "Please, I can cook, I can clean, I can mend. I don't need payment, just food, shelter, just a chance to survive." Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly, not in cruelty, but in thought. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Work's easy to promise when you're hungry," he said quietly, his voice gravel and smoke. "But what I need isn't another pair of hands." Her brow furrowed. "I don't understand." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy as a storm cloud. Then, from somewhere inside the house, the sound of soft footsteps echoed. A little girl, no more than 5, peeked out from behind Samuel's leg. She had his eyes, those same storm-gray depths, but her hair was a golden halo, wild and untamed. She clutched a ragged doll in one arm, her small face guarded but curious. Samuel looked down at his daughter, then back at Clara. His voice softened, though it carried a raw edge. "What I need," he paused, swallowing hard. "What I need is someone who can be a mother." The words sank into Clara's heart like an arrow. For a moment, she could only stare at him, lips parted, unsure how to breathe. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't thought beyond her own survival, hadn't dared to dream that someone might ask her to fill a place so sacred, so fragile. She faltered, her throat thick with emotion. "I don't know if I can be what you ask. But I can try. I can love her, if she'll let me." The little girl studied Clara with wide eyes. After a tense silence, she stepped forward, shy but determined, and reached for Clara's hand. The small fingers curled around her own rough ones, and in that moment, something inside Clara cracked open. Samuel saw it too, his jaw tightened, his gaze flicking away to the horizon. "Then come inside," he said gruffly, stepping back. And so it began. Life on the ranch was grueling, but Clara meant every word she had spoken. She worked from dawn until the stars crowned the sky. Her hands blistered, then calloused, her body ached in ways she hadn't thought possible. She carried water, mended fences, cooked meals, and scrubbed floors until her muscles screamed. But she never complained, because every evening, when the little girl, Mary, would crawl into her lap with sleepy eyes and a head full of questions, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years: belonging. Samuel was a harder puzzle to piece together. He spoke little, kept to himself, and carried an invisible wall around his heart. He worked alongside her in silence, though sometimes she caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice. His grief lingered like a shadow, an unspoken ghost that lived in every corner of the house. One night, as Clara mended Mary's dress by the firelight, Samuel finally spoke of it. "My wife died 3 winters ago," he said quietly, staring into the flames. "Fever took her before we could fetch the doctor. She was the kind of woman who lit up a room just by stepping into it. Losing her," he exhaled, shoulders heavy. "It near killed me." Clara set her needle down, her chest aching with empathy. "I'm so sorry," he nodded, still staring at the fire. Since then, it's just been me and Mary. I can run this ranch, provide food, keep the roof over our heads. But she needs more than that. She needs softness, laughter, a woman's touch. That's what I meant when I asked if you could be a mother." Clara swallowed, tears pricking her eyes. She had no children of her own. Her fiancé had gone off to war years ago and never returned, leaving her to fend for herself. She had buried the dream of motherhood long ago, but here it was, handed back to her in the form of a little girl who had already begun to steal her heart. Over time, walls began to crumble. Samuel, though still stern, began to soften in Clara's presence. He'd catch himself listening to her hum while she baked bread, or watching the way she brushed Mary's hair with gentle patience. She brought warmth back into the house, and for the first time in years, Samuel felt something stir inside him that he thought he'd buried with his wife. But not everyone in town welcomed Clara. Whispers followed her when she went to the general store. Some said she was nothing but a drifter, taking advantage of a grieving rancher. Others sneered at her patched dresses and worn shoes. Clara bore it silently, though the words cut deep. What mattered most was Mary's laughter and the way Samuel's eyes had begun to lose their constant shadow. One evening, after a long day of branding cattle, Samuel found Clara in the barn, scrubbing a pail. The lantern light flickered across her face, and he felt his chest tighten. "Clara," he said, his voice low. She looked up, startled, but didn't speak. He took a slow breath. "You've done more than work. You've given Mary back her smile. And you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." Her breath caught, heart hammering. "Samuel," he stepped closer, his rough hand brushing against hers. "I don't just want you to be her mother. I want you to be my wife." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak. For a woman who had once stood at his door with nothing but desperation, she had found everything she had ever longed for. The wedding was small, held under the open sky with the wind carrying the scent of wildflowers. Mary stood between them, grinning as she clutched both their hands. And as Samuel kissed Clara for the first time as his wife, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the ranch in golden light. From that day on, Clara no longer worked until her hands bled out of desperation. She worked out of love. Love for a little girl who called her Mama, and love for a man who had finally opened his heart again. And though the land was still harsh and the days still long, the house was filled with laughter, warmth, and a new beginning. A family, born not of blood, but of choice and of love strong enough to heal the deepest wounds.